समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Even the cool, gentle winds blowing across Kutch that November brought Chief Commissioner of Police S.A. Ghadge no calm. It had been, he wrote, very depressing. 3 men with guns and another with an axe had attacked the village of Ratadia, beating up the local Kunbi inhabitants and stolen 3,750 rupees, as well as a camel. 2 weeks later, another gang of dacoits had attacked the village of Tunbi, stolen some 25,000 rupees in goods, and looted the ornaments that adorned the idol in the local temple. The notorious bandit Silu raided the villages of Khane and Dumra. To Ghadge, historian Farhana Ibrahim records, it was clear what was going on. The Pakistan government had been harboring dacoits wanted by Kutch, Ghadge wrote. They are even able to move out openly in Pakistan and are not arrested there in spite of the fact that intimation about such dacoits is communicated to the police officers in Pakistan. Hi and welcome to this week's episode of The Print Explorer. To those of you who are watching Explorer for the first time, I hope you enjoy it. To regular viewers, a special thank you for your support and of course for watching The Print. You'll be wondering, of course, why we're talking about Kutch, which has been about as far away from the national conversation as it's possible to imagine. The reason, though, is because of the conversations that have been going on about international mediation between India and Pakistan. Few people know that there is actually one border in India that wasn't decided on by the departing British Empire nor by war, but in a court of law by foreign judges. At the end of this month, 60 years ago, on the 30th of June 1965, India and Pakistan agreed to international arbitration to settle their border on the great marshes which run along the Rann in Gujarat. This is the only part of the India-Pakistan border that was settled by foreign mediation. And to me, that raises an interesting question. Following the massacre in Pahalgam in May, India had announced that it was placing the Indus Waters Treaty, hammered out with the help of the World Bank, in abeyance. India has said it won't reopen negotiations on the treaty unless its concerns on terrorism are met. Then we had Pakistan's Defence Minister Khwaja Asif announce that the Shimla Agreement, signed after the Bangladesh Liberation War of 1971, is quote unquote dead. Exactly what Khwaja Asif meant by that is a bit unclear, since the Shimla Agreement says a lot of different things, but the point is pretty clear. India and Pakistan are reopening what were thought to be foundational, unmovable building blocks of their relationship. There was, as we know, deep unhappiness in India over the Run of Kutch award. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi at the time noted that she would accept the award, but added that, quote, it was not merely based on the material produced by the two countries, but also on certain political considerations. Her deputy, Prime Minister Morarji Desai, voiced similar sentiments. He said, after going into arbitration, it does not lie in our mouth to say we will not accept the award and that we shall defy the world, but we do not want to live like outlaws. M.C. Chagla, the legendary jurist, law scholar R.P. Anand wrote back in 1968, deemed the arbitration award a political rather than a judicial verdict. Chagla wondered aloud if India was really bound to implement it. Like in the case of the Indus Waters Tribunal, India has lots of good reasons to be unhappy about the concessions it made in Kutch. The region has continued to be a hub for smuggling weapons and narcotics for Pakistan-based criminals, just as a certain Dawood Ibrahim Kaskar and his affiliates used the region to run gold in the 70s and 80s. The arbitral award delivered by the Indo-Pakistan Western Case Boundary Tribunal on 30th June 1965. Could it be under threat too? Every monsoon, the white sheets of the run of Kutch are covered over by the sea and the waters of the rivers like the Luni, Rupan and Bamban. Then the water, just some inches deep in some places, several feet deep in others, dries, leaving behind endless salt pans. This is strange terrain, neither sea nor land. Some nights residents even see gentle balls of fire dancing over the run, spontaneously set off by igniting phosphine, diphosphine and methane which rises from the marsh. The territorial conflict over the run actually predated independence. The province of Sindh claimed rights over half of the run as early as 1938. The two new countries which emerged in 1947 continued the debate, which dragged on for over a decade. Islamabad, or rather Karachi, which was then Pakistan's capital, claimed the run should be governed by conventions on dead seas, which would have meant splitting the territory in half. India insisted there was no basis at all for Pakistan's claims, citing official colonial era maps. From 1949, trouble slowly began to build up, with arguments and disputes breaking out over which country's citizens had rights to the scarce grazing grounds in the region. There was talk of war too. In 1951, a delegation of Muslim villagers from Banni and Khawda presented police officer Ghadge with a memorandum. It read, "We declare that we are loyal to the government of India, and if the Pakistan government attacks the Indian government, we will sacrifice our lives for the security of India, just as our forefathers in the past." The trouble gathered momentum in 1955 when Pakistan completed work on a road to Gul Muhammad Talawadi and stationed Sindh Reserve Police personnel opposite the grazing grounds at Chhadbet. The Pakistani police personnel, villagers told Indian authorities, were encouraging their villagers to refuse to pay the grazing ground fees at Chhadbet. And Indian patrol that reconnoitred the area in 1956 was fired on, though there were no casualties. Even as diplomatic protest notes were exchanged between New Delhi and Karachi, Indian authorities discovered that the whole of Chhadbet had actually been occupied by the Sindh Reserve Police. The Indian Army's 112 Brigade was ordered to move to the area and occupy the Bediabet area. The airport at Bhuj was improved and a system of pickets staffed by the Central Reserve Police was put in place. For the moment, things seemed to be under control. For reasons that are still debated, and you'll soon see why, trouble broke out again in 1964, just months before Pakistan began its offensive into Kashmir using irregulars and army personnel. Ever larger numbers of graziers began to enter the Kanjarkot area with their herds of animals. Indian forces briefly arrested 3 of them in May 1964, hoping it would have some deterrent effect. That didn't help though. Then, in February 1965, an Indian patrol discovered that the Pakistanis had built up their positions in and around Kanjarkot using its paramilitary force, the Indus Rangers. The terrain in that area wasn't to India's advantage at all. The military's base at Bhuj was 177 kilometers from Kanjarkot, and even the forward station at Khawda was over 100 kilometers away. There was no drinking water available after the village of Khawda except at Vigikot, but the desalination plant the Indian Army had put up there could only meet the numbers of a very small number of soldiers. In contrast, the Pakistani town of Badin, just 30 kilometers away, housed an airbase with a modern radar system. The Pakistanis had also built a track from Surai to Ding, cutting through Indian territory on its way to Kanjarkot. The Central Reserve Police responded by seeking to cut off Pakistan's access to Kanjarkot. It set up a position called Sardar Post, some 4,600 meters away from the grazing ground. Further posts were put up to defend Sardar Post. From the outset, some advocated for more vigorous action. Lieutenant Colonel K. Sundarji, who would later rise to become Chief of the Indian Army, carried out reconnaissance in the area dressed in police uniform and suggested an immediate offensive operation to seize Kanjarkot. he was denied permission by his superiors. Fearful that India might launch a preemptive attack on Kanjarkot, exactly the kind of thing Sundarji was calling for, Pakistan struck first on the night of 9 April 1965. Troops of the 18 Punjab Regiment and 8 Frontier Force struck at Kanjarkot and its surrounding pickets. The CRP personnel at Sardar Post held out for several hours. Fearing that Indian reinforcements would arrive, the Pakistanis finally called off their attack. The CRP personnel at Sardar Post, meanwhile, withdrew to Vijikot. Later, a patrol of troops from the 2 Sikh Light Infantry led by Sundarji visited Sardar Post to see if it had been occupied. He found the area strewn with the bodies of killed Pakistani soldiers. Kanjarkot, though, continued to be in Pakistani hands, and while no further infantry attack was attempted, it kept up artillery fire on Vigikot and Sardar Post. Air Marshal Asghar Khan, Commander-in-Chief of the Pakistan's Air Force, now called up his counterpart Air Marshal Arjun Singh to propose that both sides maintain a 16-kilometer air exclusion zone over the area. The idea was to avoid escalation, and Arjun Singh agreed. However, Pakistan Army helicopters continued to fly over the area, guiding the artillery fire onto Vigikot and Sardar Post. The fire was so intense it compelled the CRP to abandon its posts at Serabet and Biarbet. A raid carried out by Lieutenant Nadir Parvez of the 5 Punjab Regiment succeeded in overrunning a post at Serabet, killing 8 CRP personnel and blowing up the water tank and ammunition store. Following this fighting on 23 April, men at Serabet, which was held by some 70 soldiers of the 3 Para-Commando Regiment, came under attack by a much larger force equipped with tanks. The troops of 3 Para knocked out 3 tanks with their recoilless guns, but were compelled to withdraw in the face of overwhelming numbers. 3 days later, another attack overwhelmed Indian defences at Biarbet. This time again, Indian artillery succeeded in knocking out 3 Pakistani tanks, but proved inadequate to stop the advancing force. The two countries now seem to be moving towards war. In Parliament, Defence Minister Y.B. Chavan announced that all leave had been cancelled in response to the general mobilization in Pakistan. The Pakistan Army Chief, Lieutenant General Muhammad Musa, also put his forces on a 12-hour standby. Like in so many past and future India-Pakistan crises, global diplomacy and pressure began to step in. In a 23 April 1965 letter to both Prime Minister Shastri and Pakistan's military ruler, Field Marshal Ayub Khan, British Prime Minister Harold Wilson called for a ceasefire, to be followed by a restoration of the border to the position at the beginning of the year. 2 months of negotiations led to a ceasefire which allowed India to occupy its lost position at Charbet and resume patrols in the area. Following this, a 3-judge international tribunal was set up to adjudicate the two countries' border claims. The International Tribunal Award accepted India's fundamental claim that the border ran to the north of the run. This meant the entire marshlands were in India. Thus, India's claims on Sardar Post, Biarbet and Serabet were secured. The tribunal, however, granted Kanjarkot and Charbet to Pakistan as part of an 828 square kilometre swath of territory. This was a source of deep unhappiness to many in India who felt that the award was legally untenable. But leaders at the time thought this arid swathe of ground wasn't worth going to war over. For months afterwards, Indian military commanders debated just what had gone wrong in the run. There were accusations that intelligence on the Pakistani build-up had been wanting. This, however, turned out to be incorrect. In 1971, India's official war history notes, Chief of Army Staff Jayanto Chaudhary actually admitted that he had, and I quote, adequate information regarding the southward move of some Pakistani military units. The full implications of this intelligence, though, was improperly assessed, with Indian commanders concluding that no major offensive was imminent. Local units, India's official war history states, were left largely to make their own decisions with no overall directions offered by higher commanders on how to confront the Pakistanis. Evidence suggests that India was in fact willing to strike across the border into Punjab, just as it was due to do following Pakistan's assault on Kashmir later in the year, if the ceasefire had not been negotiated. The one armoured division, then India's primary strike formation, had been moved west from Jhansi, the 15 Infantry Division from Dehradun and the 2 Armoured Brigade all to locations near Amritsar. The 6 Mountain Division had been moved from Bareilly to Jalandhar. The lessons Pakistan learned were very different. Ever since 1962, tensions had been mounting between Field Marshal Ayub Khan's regime and its long-time patron, the United States, over Pakistan's policies. Washington had started to become irritated with Ayub's increasing closeness to communist China and even threatened to scale back aid. Then, on 12 May, the United States informed both India and Pakistan not to use American-made military equipment in the Kutch. This obviously affected Pakistan to a much greater degree, even though India had also received some arms from the United States after the 1962 war with China. But America's diplomatic pressure came only after the bulk of the fighting was over. Field Marshal Ayub Khan drew 3 conclusions from these events, all of them incorrect. First, he decided that the United States would turn a blind eye to any future operations by Pakistan. The second was that the Indian army would not be able to resist a determined Pakistani offensive. And the third was that India would be pushed by Western pressure not to launch a counter-offensive if things went wrong. As the historian Farooq Bajwa has noted in a superb book on the War of 1965, all these assumptions were to be dismantled in the course of the War of 1965. India would emerge determined to seize what it could in battle and not to return what had been lost in the battlefield. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a contributing editor with ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of The Print Explorer.